Quiet down, please. Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the special meeting of the Planning and Zoning for Tuesday, December 7th, 2021. Our first item is Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we have one item on our new business tonight, application 21-36P, 25 Talbot Lane site plan. I'll just turn to our town planner, Michelle Leip.
I have nothing new for the commission. You do have in front of you approval condition drafts for your consideration. You have two things. One is what we had last week with just a little bit of massaging on it, and then also Commissioner Wagner provided some additional information that he'd like to discuss, so I distributed copies of that as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll check with the town engineer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing new to add.
Okay. So at this time, our first part of this proceeding is the Interveners Petitions. We have three groups of interveners, and I will open up the floor to discussion and/or motions regarding that.
May I make a motion at this time?
Sure.
So this is a motion in the case of the intervener, Mr. Butler, but it also is going to be the same motion for interveners Lynette's and Jaya Raj and Happy Wicks. I hope I pronounced your name somewhere close to the correct pronunciation. So this is a motion in agreement with the intervener's findings. Based on the verified complaint and the record as a whole, we find that the proposed development as set forth by the applicant is reasonably likely to cause the unreasonable pollution, impairment, or destruction of the public trust in the air, water, or other natural resources of the state, and find that prudent and feasible alternative of a smaller building with less truck bays and fewer trucks on site would minimize the impacts.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I'll open up for discussion, and the person who made the motion has the floor.
Okay, so my problem with this is that it talks about the state's environment, the impairment and destruction of the public trust in the air, water, and other natural resources of the state. And to me, regardless of whether we think of this as a truck terminal or a distribution center or a warehouse, I think this is a fairly typical example of at least one of those, which we have many of them in the state. So I'm having trouble voting that this unlike other distribution centers or other warehouses, is going to cause unreasonable pollution. So my belief on this is I plan to vote no on this motion. That's it.
Could you repeat that last sentence, please, Steve?
I plan to vote no on the motion.
Okay.
Let me turn my cell phone off,
Yeah,
like everyone
please,
else should too.
If anyone in the audience has a cell phone, if they would, please put it on vibrate. We would appreciate it. Commissioners, we have discussion on whether or not we support the intervener's motions. Is there anyone else who would like to talk? And I just want to make a note of it for the record that Commissioner Foley could not be with us tonight, but he is attending virtually Good evening, Commissioner Foley. Okay.
Good evening.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay.
And also, we have Commissioner Dexter, who's absent tonight. So Commissioner Bernstein will be seated for Commissioner Dexter. So Commissioner Cavagna, you have the floor.
I've mentioned this for quite a while, and I really dislike repeating myself, but throughout these meetings ever since the beginning of November, I've expressed, again, concerns with the health of what it may cause for the neighbors, for what it may cause for Carlos Pasa. And I said that in the very early stages of this application in the hopes to receive a little bit more information on if those claims that I have are wrong, for example, because we all are here to make a more thorough decision. So when I read the language that the interveners have proposed, I do believe that this would be likely to cause pollution, impairment, and destruction in the public trust in the air, water, other natural resources for the state. So that's where I'd have to differ on that.
Okay. Any other commissioners want to speak up? Commissioner Bernstein?
So I'd like to make some comments not necessarily related to the motion. Would that be appropriate, Mr. Chair?
If it has to do with the intervener status, yes.
Then I'll reserve my comments for a little bit later. But I will say, based on what Commissioner Wagner read, I do agree with the motion.
And I echo that as well. I am in agreement with Commissioner Wagner.
Okay. Then, unless Commissioner Foley has anything,
No, I agree with Commissioner Wagner and the rest of the commission. Thank
okay.
you.
I do have to say, I've had some serious concerns about this and whether or not the applicant has proved their point in the intervener status. My personal feeling is that I feel it will violate. It's just I'm having issues. Is there adequate information in the record to support my personal feelings? So that's the issue I'm having. If there's no one else that wishes to speak, I'll call the motion, and if you are in support of the motion that it is reasonably likely to cause the unreasonable pollution, impairment, or destruction of the public trust in the air, water, and natural resources, you would have an aye. If you are against or feel that the applicant did not have sufficient proof, you should say nay. So, all those in favor, and we're going to do a roll call. So I will ask the secretary to do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Cavagnaro?
Well, then I had a quick question. I had my light go on before. So if we say aye, I just want to clarify. We're saying that we agree that this will cause pollution and impairment, right?
Correct.
Okay. Aye.
Unreasonable pollution.
Commissioner Wagner?
No.
Commissioner LeBlanc?
Sorry. I'm saying aye, that I agree with what we just deliberated. Commissioner Wagner's comment, and
So you're in favor of the motion?
favor of the motion.
Okay.
Aye. Commissioner Bernstein,
Aye.
Commissioner Foley,
Aye.
Chairman Pasiconis.
I have to say nay. So we have,
I must be confused.
why?
Were we saying that we believe that
Right,
that the applicant,
right
that
now,
this application would cause air and noise pollution to the neighbors? Let's simplify it.
Not to the neighbors, to the state.
I believe the motion passes 4-2.
But is he asking to reconsider? What did he was talking.
What was that, Steve?
Is he asking to reconsider?
Kevin, are you asking to reconsider?
Can you explain this one more time, Steve? Do me a favor. Can we go
I'd
over
like
this
to hear
one
it
more time?
too. Yeah.
All right, so the way this motion reads, basically, that this application, if it's approved, this application, this site would cause unreasonable pollution, blah, 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 to the resources of the state. And we believe there's enough evidence in the record to support that conclusion. There are other motions that could be made later that would get in more detail, but this is just a simple thing. And I think my understanding, Michelle, Mrs. Leip, this actually would end the meeting at this point if we approve this motion.
That is correct.
Whereas if we deny this motion, we're saying that we don't believe there's enough evidence in the record to state that the site would cause unreasonable pollution, destruction, impairment of the public trust in the air, water, and other natural resources of the state. It's not about the neighbors, it's about the state and the state's environment. That's my interpretation, and that's why I'm voting against it. My feeling about the impact on the neighbors could be very different. In fact, is, okay, but that's...
Okay, I didn't know what the purpose of the state was when we're concerned about our neighbors, but.
Okay, so
So I want to change mine, okay?
Kevin, do you have a copy of the motion in front of you?
Trying to bring it up now. I'm trying to run two computers at the same time. And
He should have it in a document sent.
well, just, I'm changing my vote.
I'd like to do the same. I misread it like T did.
Let me read the motion one more time.
Okay.
Based on the verified complaint and the record as a whole, we find that the proposed development as set forth by the applicant is reasonably likely to cause the unreasonable pollution, impairment, or destruction of the public trust in the air, water, or other natural resources of the state, and find that prudent and feasible alternative of a smaller building with less truck bays and fewer trucks on site would minimize the impacts. Now, I know there's been a little bit of questioning, confusion. So I would like the commissioners to repeat your vote one more time. If you could, please call the roll call.
Commissioner Cavagnaro,
Aye.
Commissioner Wagner,
Nay?
Commissioner LeBlanc, Commissioner Bernstein,
Aye.
Commissioner Foley,
Aye.
Chairman Pasiconis.
Nay. So what do we have?
You have Commissioner LeBlanc, Commissioner Wagner, and yourself as nays. You have Commissioner Cavagnaro, Commissioner Foley, and Commissioner Bernstein as ayes. So you've split.
Okay. So at this point, you need 4 successful votes to pass a motion. So at this time, that motion fails. Do you have another motion, or?
I do. So to move things along, we need to have an approval motion that we can discuss and vote on. So, and I have provided all the commissioners a copy of what I'm going to say because it's fairly complicated and I want to make sure I cover everything. So, okay, so let me read the motion actually consists of 2 parts, one of which the town planner has prepared. And it is approval of application 21-36P, 25 Talbot Lane Distribution Facility. And it's for site plan approval of a 359,640 square foot distribution facility on 30.37 acres of property. Our property located at 525, 475, and 551 Governor's Highway I-Zone. Prior to commencement of any site work, a meeting must be held with town staff. No building permit will be issued until the, okay, these are standard approval conditions until I get to condition 1 through 3 are standard, 1 and 2 are standard. Condition 3 deals with bonds. This application is subject to the conditions approval of the Inland Wetlands Agency Conservation Commission, including bonds in the amount of $50,000 to ensure compliance with the erosion and sediment control measures, and $100,000 to ensure establishment of a stormwater system and wetlands mitigation. Condition 4, a landscape bond in the amount of $75,000 is required and must be submitted prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy if work is not completed. Conditions 5 through 12, actually conditions 5 through 12 are standard conditions. Condition 13, engineering comments dated August 27, 2021 must be incorporated into the final plans. Condition 14, all truck queuing shall occur within the site boundaries. No truck shall park on Talbot Lane or Governor's Highway waiting to enter the site. Signage shall be maintained along the public roadway, Talbot Lane, indicating no parking, standing, or queuing. And I would revise that to say no truck parking, truck standing, or truck queuing. A waiver to section 6.3.3.f, as in Foxtrot, has been granted to allow 12 exterior light poles on the western side of the site to be 35 feet in height, subject to staff approval. Number 16, no truck washing shall occur on site without further approval from this commission. Number 17, a deed combining all 4 properties into one building lot shall be submitted. The property address shall be known as 25 Talbot Lane. Number 18, evergreen trees and/or bushes shall be implanted within the 50-foot buffer area to enhance the screening of the site and maintain buffer screening over time, subject to staff approval. The facility operator and the operator security services shall monitor and enforce compliance with all state and local idling ordinances. No idling signs shall be posted on the site in areas visible to truck drivers. The applicant shall utilize the state Connecticut DEP model design for such signage. The applicant shall comply with all state and local noise ordinance. A 60-foot wide by 12-foot tall wooden wall to mitigate sound shall be constructed at the southern end of the loading dock area in the area presented by the applicant. Condition 21, the conservation 40-foot easement shown to include the berm and landscape area shall include language requiring the maintenance of the plantings in perpetuity to achieve the required buffing or screening requirements of section 6.2.4B. Condition 22, sightline easements, grading easements, and potential future right-of-way shall be shown on the plans in the vicinity of Governor's Highway site drive to accommodate potential road improvements that the town may consider in the future. Condition 23, if the use of this facility changes from a warehouse distribution facility, the applicant is to return to the Planning and Zoning Commission for further approval of the use. 24, a pathway from the southern end of the site shall be pursued through the town open space to provide a connection to the existing walking trail created as part of the Constitution Landing Industrial Subdivision. Condition 25, grading along Governor's Highway shall be able to accommodate a future 5-foot sidewalk. Condition 26, subject to staff approval, the site plan shall be modified to accommodate the queuing of a minimum of 16, that's 16 tractor trailers on the westerly side of the site within the area currently shown for tractor trailer parking. The design shall also be such that trucks are not required to blind back into the truck bays. Condition 27, there shall be no security gate at the truck entrance of Talbot Lane to allow for the free flow of tractor trailers onto the site. In the event the future owner-tenant wants to incorporate a gate, a truck queuing plan shall be submitted as part of the site plan modification application to this commission. 28, prior to allowing use of heavy equipment around these, oh boy, I think I don't have the latest version. Around these clearing identified, the applicant shall commission a detailed sweep from certified professionals on explosive ordnance disposal in the areas identified on aerial mapping, submitted at the public hearing to ensure absence of any unexploded ordnance. Now, those are the conditions that were provided by the town planner. In reviewing the record, I would like to offer additional conditions as part of the motion. So, and they're now on this handout that I've given to the other commissioners. Condition 29, tractor trailer trucks are limited to loading docks no closer than 200 feet from the northern and southern ends of the building, to be enforced by appropriately placed signage at loading docks, as well as operational procedures of the occupant. Condition 30, and I apologize for how long this is, prior to construction and prior to subsequent changes in the occupant or the occupant's use of the facility, the owner and intended occupant shall submit to the planning department a description of the activities of the occupant in sufficient detail to determine that the use is a distribution center and/or warehouse and not a truck or freight terminal. If the planning department determines that such use would be considered a truck or freight terminal, the owner shall apply to the commission for review and approval of the use prior to construction or change. The planning department should consider distribution of inventory to other sites other than distribution centers, warehouses, and truck or freight terminals to be typical of distribution center use, whereas distribution of inventory among distribution centers, warehouses, and truck or freight terminals to be typical of truck or freight terminals. Condition 31, the operator and the operator security service shall not permit trucks that fail to comply with the federal truck noise standards, particularly 10 CFR 40, Part 205, and I just added that Part 205, to load or unload cargo based on visible conditions such as non-standard mufflers, straight pipe exhausts, or damaged or corroded exhaust system parts. And finally, condition 32, the commission requests that the applicant perform a comprehensive noise impact evaluation for the allowed operations in the truck parking lot and to install any additional noise barriers needed to ensure that sound levels at the property lines are below those cited in Section 50, the Town of South Windsor Ordinances.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Under discussion, I will turn to Steve Wagner. As he made the motion, he has the right to speak on it.
Okay, thank you, and I apologize for how long this is going to be. Let me start by discussing several of the conditions in the motion. Condition 8 requires approval of the sanitary sewer connection by the Water Pollution Control Authority. This follows the usual sequence of approvals and adequately addresses the concern of one or more of the residents that this has not happened. Condition 9 requires approval by the Office of State Traffic Administration. This is likely to be given with the possibility of minor changes to site access. Conditions 14 and 16 address truck queuing. I'll have more to say about that later. Condition 17 requires a combination of the 4 affected properties. Minimum lot and area requirements in Table 4.1.6A make this necessary for the site plan to work. I will discuss that in a few moments. Condition 19 requires compliance with state and local idling ordinances and engages the occupant in enforcing these rules. The current laws, and I'm going to read some details in this area. The current laws and ordinances are Connecticut General Statute, Section 22A 174-18, control of particulate matter and visible emissions, and Town of South Windsor Ordinances, Section 94-74, anti-idling. The applicant committed to enforcing a 3-minute idling rule. However, I found the testimony of intervener Derek Butler of 596 Governor's Highway more credible because of his personal experience in the trucking industry. He testified that large trucks cannot safely limit idling to 3 minutes under all conditions, including when they perform safety checks prior to going on the road. The state standard no idling sign presented by Brian Smith of Robinson & Cole in his October 26, 2021 letter cites the reference statute in small print at the bottom of the sign. The statute cites exceptions where a 3-minute limitation should not apply for safety or other considerations. It's reasonable to require the operator to enforce the more detailed statute and ordinance. By requiring the operator to enforce the rules, objections that the operator does not own the trucks are overridden. This also gives the zoning enforcement officer, in addition to police, the authority to enforce this provision by issuing cease and desist orders and taking any needed follow-up actions. I'd like to read the relevance parts of the state statute. This is Section 22A 174-18B as in Bravo, control of particulate matter and visible emissions. B, visible emission standards. 3, mobile sources. Except as provided in subsection J of this section, no person shall cause or allow C, mobile source to operate for more than 3 consecutive minutes when such mobile source is not in motion, except as follows. I, this is Roman numeral 1, when the mobile source is forced to remain motionless because of traffic conditions or mechanical difficulties over which the operator has no control. Roman numeral 2, when it is necessary to operate defrosting, heating, or cooling equipment to ensure the safety or health of the driver or passengers. 3, when it is necessary to operate auxiliary equipment that is located in or on the mobile source to accomplish the intended use of the mobile source. 4, to bring the mobile source to the manufacturer's recommended operating temperature. 5, when the outdoor temperature is below 20 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees F. 6, when the mobile source is undergoing maintenance that requires such mobile source to be operated for more than 3 consecutive minutes. Or 7, when the mobile source is in a queue to be inspected by U.S. military personnel prior to gaining access to a U.S. military installation. And here are the relevant sections of the town's idling ordinance. Section 94-74, anti-idling purpose. The town of South Windsor recognizes that the idling of motor vehicles wastes fuel and pollutes the air. These pollutants negatively affect our health. Motor vehicle exhaust gases aggravate asthma, allergies, and cardiovascular disease. 2, the town further recognizes that large commercial vehicles which are allowed to idle make considerable noise and emit odors that may interfere with the quiet enjoyment of nearby residential properties. 3, therefore it is the intent of this section to limit the idling of trucks and other large vehicles that are parked in commercial or industrial areas that are immediately adjacent to a residential zone so as to reduce the amount of emitted pollutants and reduce the amount of noise and other odor traveling into residential areas. This is B, restrictions. No person shall cause, allow, or permit the operation of the engine of a motor vehicle while such vehicle is stopped or parked within the confines of a parking area or roadway within the industrial zone or commercial zone which is immediately adjacent to or abuts a residential zone for a period of time in excess of 10 minutes in any 1 hour period. Residential, commercial, and industrial zones shall be as defined by the zoning regulations of the town of South Windsor as adopted and from time to time amended as further designated on the approved zoning maps of the town of South Windsor. And the ordinance goes on to specify certain exceptions and penalties. Okay, condition 20 requires compliance with state and local noise ordinances and the construction of a 60-foot wide, 12-foot tall wooden wall next to the southernmost loading dock. The applicant has agreed to this. I'll have more to say about that in a few minutes. Condition 23 addresses the intended use as a warehouse distribution center facility as opposed to a truck terminal or other uses. I'll have more to say about that momentarily. Condition 24 requires a connection to the local walking trail. The applicant has agreed to this, and it updates a requirement of the current subdivision. Condition 25 requires grading for an eventual sidewalk along Governor's Highway. The applicant has agreed to this. Conditions 14, 26, and 27 address truck queuing, and I'll address this in a few minutes. Conditions 29 and 30 are more specific than condition 23 regarding whether this could be a freight terminal as discussed in the public hearing. So what I'd like to do now, let's see. Well, I have more to say in this area. Attorney John Parks, representing opponents of the application, provided a document titled Town of South Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission Application 2136P, 25 Talbot Lane, Site Plan, November 9, 2021, compliance with regulations, and testimony that discussed the differences between truck and freight terminals and warehouses and distribution centers. In the town regulations, in particular Table 4.1.1a, truck and freight terminals are evaluated under special exception rules, whereas warehouses and distribution centers are subject to site plan review. Attorney Parks then provided references from industry websites clarifying the distinction and asserted that the facility is a cross-dock facility or truck terminal. The applicant has asserted that the facility is a warehouse and distribution center, but not a truck or freight terminal. In the applicant's interpretation and cited course cases, that limits our consideration of noise, pollution, neighborhood truck traffic, and other potentially undesirable aspects of the proposed facility. A truck or freight terminal would require approval as a special exception. Given the evidence presented in the hearing and the broad neighborhood opposition, the commission would be unlikely to approve a truck terminal. During the public hearing, the applicant repeatedly reminded the commission that details of the eventual occupant's operation could not be determined at this time. On the other hand, commissioners struggled with whether the facility would become a truck or freight terminal, given the parameters set forth in the application. As is common when reviewing site plans for facilities such as this, we do not know the tenant or the exact nature of the business. We're left with what might be regarded as a worst-case assumptions about what the application permits. While some commissioners may believe that this design is inherently a truck terminal, the applicant presented dimensional evidence illustrating a distinction between truck and freight terminals and this proposal. I found this documentation informative but insufficient. Common usage in the industry is found in various internet sites and discussed in the hearing shows a vague boundary between the two uses. Hence, the commission has reason to fear that a future operation could morph into use as a truck terminal and lead to extensive, costly, and unproductive challenges attempting to shut down a business that is already in operation. Conditions 29 and 30, by controlling the types of trucks and requiring prior review, are intended to provide further assurance that the facility may not operate as a truck or freight terminal. Condition 29, by limiting the number of truck bays, that may serve as tractor trailers, attempts to set a generous but reasonable boundary between the two uses while ensuring that all bays could be used in the operation that offloads tractor trailers and distributes products locally in smaller trucks. Keeping the tractor trailers away from the ends of the buildings has a secondary effect of reducing noise in neighborhood residents and businesses. Evidence from the Handbook of Environmental Acoustics, Cohen, James P., presented at the hearing shows that at low speeds, medium trucks would use the remaining bays, produce 6 to 7 decibel less noise than tractor trailers. A review of the intended use before construction or change in occupant or use would avoid costly disputes arising later. Distribution of inventory to retail stores, including so-called warehouse stores, homes, factories, farms, and other uses is typical of other distribution centers and would be allowed. Occasional transfer of inventory among the occupants' other distribution centers in response to market conditions would be reasonable if it didn't become a significant part of the operation. For example, an occupant who maintained an inventory of snow blowers for the New England market might require transfer of snow blowers to a distribution center in Tennessee after a severe snowstorm in Tennessee. Okay, condition 31 requires the operator and the operator security service to exclude trucks that have non-compliant exhaust systems. Interveners presented evidence that at low speeds, compliant large trucks can be expected to emit up to 80 decibels at 50 feet. That non-compliant trucks can emit up to 100 decibels, and that a small percentage of non-compliant trucks continue to operate on U.S. highways. This can lead to a substantial and illegal health hazard for residents and workers in the area, not only on the site, but also in local roads. The wording of the condition avoids requiring the applicant to measure truck noise. The applicant did not address this concern other than to assert that site plan reviews cannot consider noise. Condition 32 requests further acoustic studies and possible additional sound barriers. This is stated as a request since we recognize that the current statutes, ordinances, and zoning regulations do not control most truck noises. We believe the requested changes could be processed by the planning department as a minor site plan change. Allow me to delve a little further into the reasons for this request. Article 3, Noise Control of Chapter 50 of the Town of South Windsor Ordinances addresses noise control. Section 5061 purpose states, the state legislature has found and the town council finds and declares that excessive noise is a serious health hazard to the health, welfare, and quality of life of the citizens of the state and the town. Exposure to certain levels of noise can result in physiological, psychological, and economic damage. A substantial body of science and technology exists by which excessive noise may be substantially abated. The primary responsibility for control of noise rests with the state and towns, and each person has a right to an environment free from excessive noise that may jeopardize his health, safety, or welfare. Going on, section 50-65 performance standards provides noise emitted from commercial industrial zones beyond the boundary of the lot or parcel shall not exceed the level stated in the following table with respect to adjacent residential, commercial, or industrial zones. And the table identifies levels of 61 decibels for daytime hours and 51 decibels for nighttime hours at the boundary with residential zones. Somewhat higher limits apply to nearby industrial zone properties. The section also states, further note, impulse noise shall be caused or allowed in excess of 80 decibels. And every time I say decibels, I mean dBA, which is an important distinction, technical distinction. In excess of 80 dBA peak sound pressure during the nighttime hours to any residential zone or use, and the emission of impulse noise shall not be caused or allowed in excess of 100 decibels peak sound pressure level at any time or any zone. No noise shall be emitted beyond the boundaries of a lot or parcel in excess of the noise levels established in this article. Now, I recognize that the ordinance exempts truck noise while the truck's engine is running in accordance with Connecticut General Statute Section 22A-69-1.7 and 22A-69-1.8. Nonetheless, I consider these limits to represent a reasonable definition of healthy noise levels for nearby residents. I appreciate features that the applicant has already agreed to that, among other benefits, limit noise propagation to nearby residential areas. These include placing all bays on the western side of the facility, gates and signs preventing truck access to the automobile parking areas on the east, and a noise barrier at the southernmost bay. I also appreciate the applicant's willingness to commission a simple ray tracing noise study by Brooks Acoustics Corporation based on a truck at the Southernmost Bay. We recognize that the study was limited in scope due to the very short time allowed to meet the commission schedule. The study evaluated one truck positioned at one location and the impact on one residence, 124 Edgewood Drive. To that extent, their report was exactly what I requested during the November 23, 2021 session of the hearing. The report showed that the noise propagated from a single truck next to the barrier toward that residence would not exceed the nighttime limits discussed above. One speaker, a professional engineer, commented that the A weighting in the report was not done correctly. I'm not qualified to evaluate that comment. Another speaker pointed out that a second truck would add 3 decibels to the noise at the studied home. This is consistent with my reading on the subject. The reason for requesting a more complete evaluation is to include contribution from all all parking lot operations on residents on Governor's Highway, Edgewood Drive, and Cody Circle, and a contribution from trucks not behind the currently proposed barrier. The report seems to imply that about 10 to 12 dBA of noise reduction comes from the barrier at the southernmost loading dock, and the multiple contributions of a reasonable number of trucks in motion and idling in the parking lot, and the contribution of impact noise from typical truck operations such as connecting and disconnecting trailers and impact with the loading docks. Regardless of any improvement from barriers near the parking lot, there's no way to mitigate the impact of substantial fraction of 200+ daily truck traffic on residents along Governor's Highway. All right, so now I would like to summarize the reasons why my vote on this motion. And the first issue is re-subdivision. I begin with the merging of properties. The site plan requires the merging of parcels currently known as 5 Talbot Lane, which is 1.29 acres, 25 Talbot Lane, which is 2.28 acres, 475 Governor's Highway, which is 3.87 acres, 551 Governor's Highway, which is 22.93 acres, in accordance with industrial area density and dimension requirements in Table 416A of the current zoning regulations. The site plan is not feasible in its current form without merging these parcels. The Commission commonly finds the merging of parcels desirable in other applications. However, this is neither forbidden, required, nor, unlike for the I-291 overlay zone, encouraged by the current regulations. In the current instance, the merging of these parcels is undesirable due to the impact on neighboring properties by allowing a facility of the size proposed. The Town of South Windsor subdivision regulations updated through June 25, 2017, Chapter 4, Design and Improvement Standards, subsection B as in Bravo 5, Commercial and Industrial Development Design includes the following text. Commercial and industrial development shall be designed according to the same principles governing the design of residential developments. Namely, buildings shall be located according to topography, with environmentally sensitive areas avoided to the maximum extent possible. Factors such as drainage, noise, odor, and surrounding land uses considered in siting buildings. Sufficient access shall be provided, and such access shall conform to the applicable access management regulations and adverse impacts buffered. When approving the re-subdivision of when approving the re-subdivision of parcels abutting Talbot Lane in May 1994, as well as the 2 Governor's Highway parcels at a date not presented during the hearings, the PZC in its Planning Commission role must have explicitly or implicitly considered factors such as drainage, noise, odor, and surrounding land uses. For that reason, the current PZC is obligated to review and consider the same factors. During the hearing, the Commission heard ample evidence that based on studies of similar facilities around the country, adding over 200 truck arrivals and departures daily could expose nearby residents to hazardous levels of particulate and noise pollution. This would arise from the arrivals and departures, from movement within the parking lot, and from the idling of trucks allowed by statute and ordinance I cited previously. The interveners provided an article from the American Journal of Public Health, Supplement 1, 2011, Volume 101, Number 51, Residential Proximity to Environmental Health Hazards and Adverse Health Conditions by Brender et al. That reviewed literature regarding the adverse health effects of proximity to various industrial sites, including transportation facilities. I also share the concern expressed by Brian Smith of Robinson and Cole in his letters dated October 26 and November 9, 2021, that placement of loading docks on the westerly side of the building could generate excessive amounts of air pollution from trucks idling. While Carlos Pasta utilizes trucks to deliver of its own products, the sheer magnitude of the anticipated truck traffic that can occur can adversely affect Carlos Pasta. It may be possible to modify the site plan to bring noise transmission from the parking lot to abutting homes to safe levels. However, the applicant provided no enforceable solution to protect homes along Governor's Highway from truck noise on their street. A passing truck emitting 80 decibels, 80 dBA at 50 feet will be heard at 80 dBA at a home set back 50 feet from the road. The applicant asserted that trucks would only access the site from Route 5, that is, through industrial and commercial zones. I don't find that credible. As testified by one of the interveners who works in the trucking industry, a substantial fraction of the 200-plus truck transits is likely to use truck GPS applications and find the route through a residential zone shorter and faster. The town is unable to enforce an existing ordinance limiting truck traffic through this residential zone. Further, I can think of no modifications of the site plan that would reduce air pollution on or off site. Addition of a roundabout at the intersection of Talbot Lane and Governor's Highway was discussed for the purpose of traffic calming. I don't see how that or other traffic calming measures eliminate the negative impact of trucks using Governor's Highway residential sections. Hence, I oppose the re-subdivision of these parcels to accommodate the proposed facility. Maintaining current property lines and access points will make the proposed use infeasible and result in more modest industrial projects. While residents buying homes in nearby neighborhoods would certainly be expected to realize they were near an industrial zone, the limitations of the current property lines would lead to a conclusion that the usage would be more modest than the proposal and would involve far fewer trucks. Okay, now queuing. Conditions 14 and 26 attempt to address truck queuing. If vigorously enforced, condition 14 could lead to queuing in other locations, such as other residential streets. Hence, it is important that the site itself provide adequate queuing capacity. Queuing of trucks on town roads awaiting entrance to any facility is unsafe, diminishes the quality of life on abutting properties, and adds to noise and exhaust pollution. Other commissioners who have more knowledge of trucking than I do have expressed concerns that the proposal does not adequately provide for on-site queuing. I don't believe they were convinced otherwise, even after the applicant offered a sketch showing a revised 3-lane entry and offering to eliminate an entrance control gate or a guard check. I'm not willing to delegate to staff the approval of a site plan revised to provide more on-site queuing as condition 26 implies. Hence, I find the site plan inadequate with respect to queuing. It was reported during the hearing that DEEP, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, gave a favorable recommendation to the site plan's accommodation of wildlife and wildlife movement. We were told that their evaluation did not include the impact of 24/7 truck noise on wildlife, so that remains a concern. However, in consideration of the large amount of wooded open space that has been acquired by the town, I can't object to the plan on this basis. The Planning Commission and Town Council have delegated wetland, stormwater, and wildlife management to the Inland Wetlands and Conservation Commission. We have seen that they have approved the current site plan, hence I am not allowing these issues to influence my vote. In conclusion, I intend to vote no on this motion.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Any other commissioners have anything they'd like to share? Okay, I have some concerns as well. And I'll try not to be as long as Steve, but in the regulations, Article 6, the purpose of the buffers is to mitigate visual, noise, and other impacts between residential and non-residential uses and between low-density and high-density residential uses. B, standards and design. I'll skip down to 2. Wherever any non-residential use / zone abuts any residential zone, a buffer shall be required. The buffer shall meet the following criteria. A, the field of view between the abutting residential and non-residential uses / zones shall be obscured visually within 5 years' time to such an extent that activity on the abutting lot is not immediately apparent. B, the field of view between abutting residential and non-residential use zones shall be substantially obscured visually by the maturing of the planting. Okay, the proposed berm with the landscaping on top, as shown on drawing C-GD3 and C-LS4, I believe is inadequate. The top of the berm is only 1 to 3 feet taller than the base of the building. This earthen berm, as designed, will do little to nothing to mitigate visual, noise, and other impacts from the building / site. The berm should be much higher and located within the 50-foot buffer area to take full advantage of the distance between the houses and the buildings, giving more visual and audio obstruction for the residents. By design, the wordings by design are compatible with abutting zones and uses. I also feel that the earthen berm should be part of Phase 1. Phase 1 and Phase 2 should be combined if it goes forward. My second point, I'm going to read the purpose, which I believe some of the residents brought forward in the public hearing. The purpose of the industrial zone is to afford South Windsor areas reserved for industrial uses which constitute well-planned, functional, and aesthetically pleasing environments for a prosperous industrial community, and which, by design, are compatible with abutting zones and uses. The plan as presented does not meet the by design are compatible with abutting zones and uses. I don't feel a possible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week facility is appropriate so close to a residential neighborhood without the proper buffers and such. Off-street loading. This is Article 6.4.8 of the regulations. I'm going to read that. B, loading docks, receiving areas. 1, loading docks and receiving areas shall be designed as an integral part of the building and or adequately screened such that these areas do not adversely impact the site and the building aesthetics. I'm going to skip down to number 3. Sufficient on-site vehicular maneuvering area must be provided. Trucks destined to or coming from loading docks shall not require maneuvering movements within the public highway. Access egress for loading areas shall be designed to provide adequate, safe maneuvers in a manner that does not compromise the efficiency and safety of the parking areas. Truck maneuvers on streets, drives, other than entering and exiting are not permitted. The wooden sound wall, I believe, is insufficient and does not match the building aesthetically. I believe it should be engineered with the same masonry as the building, with a height 2 foot higher than the tractor trailer box / exhaust, and possibly be comprised of an other absorbing material that does not reflect sound back and forth. We got number 4, 4.1.5 traffic requirements. Part of this section states, the applicant must demonstrate that the design provides for safe and orderly vehicular and pedestrian flow and movement of traffic and minimizes vehicular and pedestrian conflicts. This application is going to be adding a lot of automobiles to the area. As I stated during the public hearing, I feel it's the applicant should not only grade for a 5-foot sidewalk, but they should also provide the sidewalk itself. We shouldn't be expecting all these employees or people walking in the area with all this additional traffic to be walking in the road in the winter. We should require a sidewalk to make it safe. Now is the time to do it while this project is moving forward. Okay, 6.1.5, traffic and circulation considerations. I'm going to read number 1. On-site queuing provisions must be adequate to prevent site-generated traffic from queuing onto public streets. I don't believe the applicant has demonstrated that they have adequate queuing to prevent site-generated traffic from queuing on public streets, namely Talbot Lane and really talking about the truck traffic. I believe that's the concerns that I have. I'll open it up to any other commissioners who would like to speak. And I can't see if Mr. Foley has a light on or not, so.
No comment. You and Steve have pretty much covered it all. Thank
Okay.
you.
Commissioner Bernstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I had a number of comments I wanted to make. Many of them have been incorporated into some of the things that have already been stated, but there's a couple things that I do want to call out. So the applicant provided specific information on the volume and timing of truck traffic coming in and out of the facility, but yet we don't know who the tenant is. So I struggle to understand how can we know what that volume is. And I look at all the things that Commissioner Wagner went over, and I think that issues like pollution, noise, traffic congestion, queuing, damage to infrastructure, et cetera, actually could even be much worse if the tenant is someone that wants to ramp up that truck traffic. So that is an issue for me. The second thing is there has been a lot of discussion and debate about this issue of warehouses versus terminals. So I've given this a lot of thought, and I decided what I would do is use the applicant's own document to try and do some analysis of this. So what this document does is it looks at square footage, telling us that there's no consistency relative to the size to help us differentiate between the two. So there's two metrics on there, size and number of doors. But there's no consistency in terms of size. There's large and small warehouses and truck terminals, but the number of doors strikes me as being a different matter. The document clearly reflects a trend. Truck terminals have more doors and warehouses have less, with an outlier or two. So the average number of bay doors for the 12 warehouse facilities is 36, while the average number of doors for the 4 truck terminals is 74. Talbot Lane site plan shows 54 doors, which pretty much splits the difference. But if you look at it from a percentage basis, it reveals that Talbot Lane is 50% more doors than the average warehouse, and just 37% less than the truck terminal. So one could conclude that Talbot is closer to a truck terminal than a warehouse. So in the final analysis, I see that as a big issue, and it's difficult for me to vote for the application, believing that it's probably more likely a truck terminal and therefore requires a special exception. Thank you.
Okay. Any other commissioners wishing to voice concerns or support for this application? Commissioner Cavagnero, apologize for pronouncing your name wrong earlier.
It's okay, thank you. I just wanted to comment really on what Commissioner Wagner and Commissioner Bernstein had to say. Definitely do agree. I feel like a lot of things that this application was meant to be don't follow up to what the regulations really say. Like if you look at 4.1.5 for traffic requirements, on-site queuing provisions must be adequate to prevent site-generated traffic from queuing on public streets. And we saw from one of the interveners of Derek Butler, as you mentioned, Commissioner Wagner, how he had much more experience and knowledge of what that would actually cause. We've seen a lot of trucks in that area, for example, even recently, even struggling to turn into really some of the roads leading to Governor's Highway. So even then, that wasn't even taken into consideration. Trucks that are stopped midway through an intersection trying to turn into Governor's Highway. More importantly, also of what you mentioned, Chairman Pasiconis, about 6.1.5, I definitely do agree with that for traffic and circulation of consideration. I'm not going to carry on anymore, but I just really wanted to agree with what our commissioners have to say on this motion for 2136.
Okay. Commissioner LeBlanc?
Thank you. Listen, everybody, and everybody had great comments. Commissioner Wagner, that's quite a list you had in there, and I certainly listened to every word you said here. The only comment I had was just basically a repeat of last week's meeting, and again, I'm hanging on 4.5.1 and the purpose of industrial zone. And that very first paragraph, I read it last time in the meeting, I don't want to read it again, but the end of that paragraph, and Commissioner Pasiconis mentioned this, and by design are compatible with the budding zones and uses, and that whole concept of this, I'm hanging on that very last sentence of the purpose of industrial zone. And again, there's a list and litany of issues that were mentioned, and that's my take on it. And then by regulation, I'm looking at the purpose of this whole project and what that paragraph means and states. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Just to elaborate a little bit more on that and the berm, when looking at the berm on drawing C-LS4, there's a picture of the building, the 124 Edgewood Drive, and the proposed planted berm with the height of the trees at the 5-year height. And it really, if you just eye it across, it appears it goes about halfway up the building. And in reading that particular language in the regulation, the field of view between the abutting residential and non-residential use zones shall be obscured visually within 5 years' time to such an extent that the activity on the abutting lot is not immediately apparent. I don't think visually that berm meets that language. So I really think that we have to follow the language, because as Michael said, the only thing separating this from being the only thing that we are trying to do is have it by design, and the berm design is inadequate, compatible with abutting zones and uses. I don't think it meets that level. So I'll ask again, is there any other commissioners that would like to? Commissioner Wagner.
Yeah, one little thing to talk about the berms. If you read the, I don't know, the Brooks Acoustic Corporation study of noise, the two aspects that create the greatest reduction in noise were the barrier, which is limited in size, and the distance. The vegetation and the berm itself result in a very small contribution to noise abatement. So the berm could definitely be improved, or other barriers could be put in. But again, my main thing is I just don't like the idea of changing the subdivision of these properties, and that will force a much smaller type of facility than we're seeing here, both because of access issues with one of the sites, and then the other site, all the other sites are too small.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And my assertion with the berm was that if it was a larger earthen berm, then the taller earthen berm would block more of the noise than this berm that is proposed. So, okay, commissioners, is there any other discussion?
Chairman Pasconis, can I just be clear, so we have the record clear? What you're doing now is you have a motion to approve that included the additional conditions that Commissioner Wagner talked about, and that's what the vote would be on, would be the motion to approve. That's correct?
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that's clear.
At this time, Commissioner Cavagnaro.
Actually, I believe you're just about to answer the question, but just like our town planner said, we're voting first to approve the conditions for the motion on the application, right? Because we've already, like I said, we've already made the motion.
There's a lot of conditions. If
Yeah.
anybody would like to change any of the conditions proposed, then now would be the time to move such forward. Okay? If not, what we're voting on is the conditions presented by Commissioner Wagner in their total. So, I am going to call the question, would a yea vote would be to support the motion as presented. A nay vote would be to not support the motion as presented, to deny the motion as presented, okay? So at this time, I will call for a roll call.
Commissioner Cavagnero,
Nay.
Commissioner Wagner,
No.
Commissioner LeBlanc, Commissioner Bernstein,
No.
Commissioner Foley,
No.
Chairman Pasaconis.
Nay. So the motion fails unanimously. I believe that concludes our business tonight.
The motion to adjourn would be appropriate.
I move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn is been made. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Let's do a roll call. We got to do a roll call.
Commissioner Cavagnero,
Aye.
Commissioner Wagner,
Aye.
Commissioner LeBlanc,
Aye.
Commissioner Bernstein,
Aye.
Commissioner Foley,
Aye.
Chairman Pasaconis.
Aye. We are adjourned.